What I'd like you to do now is, on your piece of paper, is to divide your page into 4 columns. Rarely, sometimes, most times, and always. 4 columns, and in those columns you guys are going to put a heap of information in there, so you're better off using a landscape and divide your page into 4 columns. I want rarely, sometimes, most times, and always. Now, by the end of this seminar, what I'm hoping happens, especially for those people that say to me, oh, Ray, but I eat all the right foods, I want to know that 20% of what you're eating is in the rarely, sometimes section, and 80% of what you're eating falls into most times and always section. Any questions so far? Okay, let's move on. I normally get my clients to give yourselves a round of applause, and I'll tell you why in a second. So give yourself a round of applause. That's why we're going to give ourselves a round of applause. In 2008, Australia became the fattest country in the world. We overtook America in June 2008. We have 4 million Australians who've got 20, which represents 26% of adults who are overweight and obese. That's 4 million people obese. 1 million more than 1999. We just pipped America in June 2008. Unfortunately, we're still the leaders. There's a lot of reasons why we overtook America, and we're going to go through those today. So let's look at nutrition for fat loss. And the first thing we need to understand when it comes to nutrition for fat loss is that excessive visceral fat, and that's the fat that normally gets stored around the belly button. Some people are pear-shaped, some are apple-shaped, but all the body fat stored around the belly button is what we call visceral fat. Now, all the researchers told us that the bigger the stomach is to your hips, so your hip to waist ratio, the shorter your life expectancy is. So your life expectancy, the best way to determine your life expectancy is to have a look at hip to waist ratio. The less body fat you store around the navel area, the healthier you are. So when we see most males with skinny arms, skinny legs, and a round tummy, that doesn't mean that they're healthy because their arms and legs are skinny. It just means that most males store their body fat around their tummy. The problem with that is that's where most of our organs are. And this is when we start to suffer things like fatty liver. So abdominal fat or visceral fat is very dangerous. The more body fat we've got, the shorter our life expectancy is. So let's accept the basic facts. One is that foods contain calories. If you guys disagree in any of these, I want you to put your hand up. Calories are a measure of energy. So the more calories there are in foods, the more energy we're taking in. The more calories you eat, the greater the energy levels. We all agree on that one. What about this point here? 2,000 chocolate calories is the same as 2,000 celery calories when you're trying to energy balance. That's correct. 2,000 calories is 2,000 calories. Doesn't matter where it comes from, it's 2,000 calories. What's heavier, a kilo of salt or a kilo of steel? They're both a kilo. 2,000 calories of chocolate and 2,000 calories of celery is 2,000 calories worth of energy. So if you say, oh, Ray, but I eat really healthy, all I had today was 4 bowls of salad, well, that's fantastic, but that could be worth 3,000 calories. So just because you're eating healthy, it doesn't mean you're not going to put on body fat. Because if you're eating lots of healthy food, you're still taking in calories. What about this one? Calories that have little or no nutritional content can cause tiredness, depression, poor motivation, ultimately sickness. Do we agree on that? Okay. And before I continue, I can tell you that's a scientific fact. That people that have a very poor diet, and we're talking about poor selections of food, are at an increased risk of suffering some of these conditions here. Spot reduction is a myth. What's spot reduction? That's trying to lose body fat in a certain area. Oh, Ray, I'm trying to lose weight off my stomach, so I'll do 200 sit-ups a day. Or do you think if I drink beetroot, it's going to improve my cholesterol scores? Spot reduction is a myth. You can't perform certain exercises in certain areas to lose body fat from that area. Your body will choose where the weight comes on. Your body will choose when the weight comes off. In a nutshell, you put your socks on first, then you put your shoes on. You take your shoes off first, then you take your socks off. That's the same way your body responds when it comes to body fat. You may store body fat around your waist first, your backside. For females, it could be backside, legs, stomach, arms, chest, and face. When it comes off in the other direction. Face first, chest second, arms third, hips and backside third, fourth. It always comes off last. There is no different answer on raw food versus cooked food debate. A few clients said to me, all right, what's better, raw food or cooked food? Which one's healthier and which one's better? Unfortunately, there's no scientific evidence that one is better than the other. Depending on what you're eating, the time of day, how long it's been cooked for, whether it's fresh, not fresh, how well you cook it, there are so many variables to answering that question. So there is not one answer that fits all scenarios. Eating before or after training depends on what time you wake up, what time you train, and what time you get home. As trainers, we always get asked the question, oh Ray, I heard it was better to eat before training. Is that true? Or I heard it's better to eat after training because your body's going to use all those calories that you've just burnt. And people the mechanic told me down the road that I should be eating before. So when clients come to us, we get a little bit frustrated that they get advice from people that probably aren't qualified to give that advice. My mate's got really big biceps and he said to me that I should be having a lot of fish before I train, not after I train. When you ask advice that relates to food and exercise, always ask the people that are qualified to answer the question. And there is no definitive answer whether or not eating before or after training is better, because it depends on what time you train and what time you get home. If I get up at 5:30 and I train at 6 a.m, I'm not really likely to want to eat breakfast before I train. If I get up at 6 a.m. and my training isn't until 9:30, I'm more than likely wanting to eat breakfast before I get to training. If I train at 7:30, 8:30 at night, I'm less likely to want to have dinner after I train, or at least have a big dinner after I train. So I'm more likely prefer to have something before I start training. So it depends on what you eat, it depends on how much you eat. There's some people whose metabolisms work really, really fast and they can afford to eat an hour and a half before training. Others, the metabolism is really slow and they need to be eating 2.5 to 3 hours before training. And then certain foods can get processed really quickly. So foods that are close to body temperature, they don't require to be broken down, for example, some fruit and vegetables, don't take as long to process as things like meats. So you can afford to eat like a banana or, perhaps a muffin or a muesli bar. Something like that gets broken down a lot quicker than having something like a steak. That's why there's no definitive answer with that one.